Have you ever wondered what the silence before dawn sounds like? For most of us, it's peaceful. But in Volnava, a small town in eastern Donetsk, that silence smells of gunpowder and anticipation. On the 18th of August 2025, history wasn't written in ink, but in the fiery trails of missiles tearing across the sky. Imagine you're there in a damp cellar, listening to the earth tremble. You're not a soldier, just an ordinary citizen. Above you, Volnava is no longer the place you grew up. It's become a chessboard. And tonight, a terrifying move is about to be made. 4:19 a.m. The night is as thick as velvet. Lieutenant Yaroslav, a software engineer before the war, squints at dozens of screens in an underground command bunker. He's not looking at a conventional military map, but a complex network of data points, heat signatures, and radio waves. To him, Volnava isn't a collection of buildings, but a living organism. An organism preparing to sacrifice itself. Above, death is already present. 9 minutes before the first rays of sun, the mechanical eyes of Russian reconnaissance drones glide over the treetops. They are the heralds of hell. Yaroslav knows what they're looking for, signs of life of resistance, and he has prepared a perfect performance for them. Then they come. The first wave. 14 Shahed 136 suicide drones, metal hornets scream through the air with a terrifying whine. They fly low fast, a familiar tactic meant to overwhelm any short-range air defense. Right behind them, 3 Fab 5000 glide bombs are dropped from Su-25 jets. These are the real destroyers. Each bomb carries enough explosive power to flatten an entire city block. Their target, clear and brutal, the communications command bunker beneath the city hall where Yaroslav is sitting. The civilians have only 22 seconds of warning. The siren's wail rips through the silence. But what is 22 seconds? It's not enough time to run, not enough time to pray. It's just enough time to realize that death is hurtling toward you. One bomb detonates directly over an apartment complex, the roof torn apart like paper orange flames licking the black sky. At checkpoint V7, Pavlo, a young soldier only 19 years old, screams into his radio. "We're being overwhelmed. There are too many of them." His voice cracks with fear and the sound of explosions. Then, the signal goes dead. 4:21 a.m. A shocking and unbelievable event occurs. Across all the screens in the Russian command, every Ukrainian radar signal in the Volnava region vanishes simultaneously. The entire air defense network, the communication systems, everything collapses in silence. It's as if someone just pulled the plug on an entire city. For the Russian generals, this is a textbook victory. A perfect preemptive strike, completely neutralizing the enemy's defense system in under 5 minutes. They celebrated. They believed Volnava had fallen, that the door to advance was wide open. But they were wrong. A fatal mistake. What the satellite and drone images couldn't see, what their intelligence analysts could never have predicted, was that this silence was planned. Every deactivated radar, every silenced anti-aircraft battery, every cut radio transmission was not a failure. It was an invitation. The largest, most sophisticated trap had just been sprung. Yaroslav manages a bitter smile. The show has begun. The bait has been laid. And the predator, drunk on blood, is charging straight into a cage it doesn't even know exists. You are not watching this story by chance. You are witnessing a new chapter of military history being written. If you were in that town, what would you do? Where would you hide when your own city becomes the weapon? Comment with the country you're watching from. Press 1 if you would stay and fight. Press 2 if you would try to escape. The real war has just begun. Part 2 Amperes. Walk into the grave. The silence after a bombardment always has a ghostly quality. It's the stillness of destruction, where the air is thick with the smell of smoke, dust, and fear. At 4:22 a.m., for the Russian infantry units preparing to enter Volnava, this silence was a good sign. It meant the enemy was eliminated. Their overwhelming firepower had silenced all resistance. Commander Ivan Volkov, a seasoned officer, looks through his binoculars. The town is cloaked in darkness, illuminated only by smoldering fires. No gunfire, no radar signals, no sign of any organized defense. The area has been neutralized, he reports over the radio with confidence. He doesn't know that this statement will be one of the last things he ever says with certainty. He is leading his men into a custom-designed grave. As the first armored vehicles roll down the main street, crushing rubble under their iron treads, they are moving over a lethal neural network. This isn't a conventional defense system. This is Ukraine's Skynet, a name taken from science fiction. but the reality is far more terrifying. Skynet is not an all-powerful AI, but a decentralized defense network connected by miles of fiber optic cables and industrial belts buried underground, running through sewers and old subway tunnels. It connects everything: directional mines, seismic sensors, automated turrets, and hundreds of dormant drones. On the surface, Volnava is a ruin, but beneath the ground, death is being calibrated. Every footstep of a Russian soldier, every turn of a wheel, every radio signal they emit is being registered. Seismic sensors as small as coins camouflaged in the concrete are measuring the weight and speed of the convoy. Acoustic sensors are analyzing engine sounds to distinguish between tanks and troop carriers. RF sensors are scanning radio frequencies, identifying the locations of command officers and communication equipment. All this data is fed into a distributed processing center, not located in a single bunker, but shared across multiple nodes, so it cannot be destroyed by a single strike. Let's look closer at what awaits them. Inside rusted-out delivery vans abandoned on the roadside, 5 Gravehawk missile launchers are hidden. They aren't cumbersome air defense systems, but fire-and-forget weapons designed to be activated by specific triggers. A strong RF pulse, a characteristic heat signature, or a seismic vibration matching the pattern of a T-90 tank. On the charred bell tower of an old church, a Spartan drone is watching. It's not flying, but perched like a bat, its infrared eyes scanning the darkness. Inside, it is a payload of armor-piercing sub-drones, ready to dive like mechanical falcons. The patience of this system is terrifying. It doesn't react to the first target or the second. It waits. It analyzes. It wants to be certain that the prey is deep enough inside, that the enemy's entire formation is neatly contained within the kill box. 4:25 a.m. A Russian R-330 Zhechetel electronic jamming vehicle rolls past an old warehouse. Its mission is to blind any remaining defense systems. But it is the one that is blind. Its engine runs hot, too hot, creating an unmistakable thermal signature. A sensor on one of the Gravehawk trucks detects it. The system achieves a target lock in less than a second. A short hiss, a streak of fire. No warning. The jamming vehicle becomes a fireball shrapnel flying for hundreds of meters. For the Russian soldiers, it's a shock. A shot from nowhere. But it wasn't just an attack. It was a signal. The signal confirming the enemy was deep enough inside. The signal that triggers the entire symphony of destruction. From the north, another Russian convoy is moving through Market Street, still relaxed, still unsuspecting. They don't know that the boundaries of their graveyard have already been drawn right under their feet. If you were on that road, would you sense the lurking danger, or would you vanish just like them? Press 1 if your heart starts racing. Press 2 if you would immediately call for air support. 4:26 a.m. The town of Volnava is no longer under siege. It has become the siege engine, and the enemy just pulled the trigger. Part 3. Symphony of Steel. The explosion from the jamming vehicle wasn't just an explosion, it was a death knell. It was an electromagnetic pulse, a coded digital signal transmitted not through radio waves but through the very ground of Volnava. Under the cracked streets and the damp sewers, that signal spread like a seizure awakening a slumbering beast. At 4:26 a.m., the Symphony of Steel began. And this symphony started from the sky. The remaining Shahed drone squadrons were still circling, searching for targets of opportunity in the chaos. They were aerial predators accustomed to dominating the skies. But they didn't know that the ground beneath them had just split open. From seemingly harmless locations inside a ruined bus station under a parking lot within a forgotten shipping container, Skynet's automated gun turrets emerged. These weren't exposed cannons easily spotted. They were hidden in hydraulic silos perfectly camouflaged. Now steel plates flew open, and black tungsten 35mm barrels rose, swiveling with chilling mechanical precision. These weren't ordinary cannons. They fired AHEAD, Advanced Hit Efficiency and Destruction Ammunition Programmable Airburst rounds. As each shell leaves the barrel, an electromagnetic coil measures its precise velocity and programs its detonation time. They don't need to hit the target. They just need to get close. And they did. Thousands of rounds per minute screamed into the sky, creating a constant tearing shriek. Just before reaching the drone squadron, they detonated in unison, creating lethal walls of shrapnel in mid-air. Each shell unleashed 152 tungsten pellets, turning empty space into a kill zone. The Shahed drones tried to evade, but while you can dodge a bullet, you can't dodge a wall of steel. They were torn apart in midair, not by a single large explosion, but by thousands of small fatal cuts. Wings were severed, engines destroyed, fuselages riddled with holes. The sky over Volnava, dark just seconds before, was now a fiery dome lit by tiny popping explosions and the burning wreckage of drones falling like a meteor shower. On the ground, the chaos was exponentially worse. The Russian infantry, still stunned by the jamming vehicle's explosion, now looked to the sky in horror. They couldn't understand what was happening. The enemy's air defense was supposed to be neutralized. As they were disoriented, the ground beneath their feet began to growl. In the ruins of a bombed-out library where charred books still lay scattered, something began to rise from beneath the rubble and broken tiles. It was a Z-500, an autonomous combat robot nearly 7 feet tall. It had no face, only a cluster of optical and infrared sensors scanning the environment. Its sensors locked onto heat signatures, the warmth of human bodies. As it rose, the twin M2 Browning heavy machine guns mounted on its arms began to spin up. The sound of an M2 is unlike any other. It's not the pop-pop of a rifle, but a deep, powerful thump-thump-thump, each finger-sized round capable of punching through brick walls. The Russian soldiers scrambled for cover, but the fire wasn't coming from just one direction. From another alley, a smaller automated turret opened up. From the rooftop, opposite, an automated sniper began picking off high-value targets. They were pinned down. A soldier tried to yell into his radio, "We're ambushed," from all sides, requesting support. But all he heard was the hiss of static. The jamming vehicle, their protective charm, was gone. Now they were completely isolated. Meanwhile, hundreds of miles away in a secure Russian command center, officers stared at a digital map in disbelief. Minutes ago, Volnava was green, indicating a smooth advance. Now it had suddenly erupted in red. Dozens of their unit icons began flashing with emergency signals: comms lost coordinates, compromised, GPS signal lost. Live helmet cam feeds sputtered with static and went black. Volnava, once marked as an easy target, was now consuming them. It was like watching a heart monitor as a patient goes into sudden cardiac arrest. The slaughter wasn't over. Ukraine hadn't just set a trap. They had built a battlefield brain, an artificial intelligence capable of thinking and reacting faster than a human. A Russian supply truck attempting to turn and flee was instantly dove upon by a Sparta drone launched from the roof of a grocery store, turning its fuel tank into a massive torch. Every system Russia relied on, for battlefield control, electronic jamming, air superiority, seamless communication, was collapsing at once. This wasn't an ambush. This was a dissection. A cold, brutally precise dissection. Are you stunned by this tactic? It's as brilliant as it is terrifying. But a cornered beast is the most dangerous. The Russian forces are trapped, but they still have heavy weapons they haven't used. What will their counterattack look like? Press 1 if you think this tactic has already decided the battle. Press 2 if you believe Russia will have a devastating response. The fight for survival has only just truly begun. Part 4: The All-Seeing Eye. And the Scythe Panic is a poison that spreads faster than any virus on the battlefield. At 4:29 a.m., that poison was seeping deep into the Russian ranks in Volnava. They weren't just being attacked, they were being dismantled. Units on the western flank suddenly lost all contact, not just radio silence, but a complete digital disappearance. No GPS, no command updates, just the roar of fire and meaningless static in their headsets. This collapse was not random. It was the result of perfect coordination, a death dance conducted by an unseen maestro. 5 kilometers northwest of Volnava, hidden in a dense forest, Ukraine's M777 777 artillery crews had been silent for hours. The gunners sat in their bunkers, not looking at the battlefield but at tablet computers. Suddenly, their screens lit up. A new data stream had just arrived via a triple encrypted satellite channel, one that no Russian electronic warfare system could penetrate. This data wasn't general coordinates. They were precise, meter-accurate kill points. Where was this data coming from? Look to the sky, higher than even the suicide drones could operate. A Sparta reconnaissance drone, painted the gray color of the clouds, was circling silently. It carried no bombs, no missiles. Its weapon was light. An invisible laser beam was continuously painting the battlefield below, marking high-priority targets. A mobile command vehicle, a supply convoy trying to regroup a cluster of infantry hiding behind a wall. These laser pulses reflected back to the drone, which converted them into precise GPS coordinates and sent them directly to the M777 batteries. The entire process, from target acquisition to the gunner receiving coordinates, took less than 10 seconds, and the scythe began to swing. Less than 90 seconds after receiving the data, the first Excalibur artillery shells began to fall on Volnava. This wasn't an area bombardment. This was long-range surgery. Each GPS-guided Excalibur shell had a margin of error of only 1.5 meters. The first one landed directly on the roof of an armored command vehicle, flipping it like a toy. Inside, an entire battalion command staff was wiped out before they even knew they were under attack. The second landed in the middle of a convoy of fuel and ammunition trucks. A horrific chain reaction of explosions erupted, turning an entire street into a river of fire. But it wasn't just artillery, it was synergy. As Russian units tried to disperse to avoid the shelling, they ran into smaller traps. A communications truck, recognizing the danger, floored it to escape the laser-designated zone. But as it turned down an alley to get away, a small kamikaze drone launched from the roof of a civilian house was waiting. It flew directly into the truck's cabin, causing a small but completely disabling explosion. Every system Russia relied on for survival was being turned against them. The GPS technology they used for navigation was now guiding shells to their exact location. The radio waves they used to call for help were useless. At checkpoint K-14 on the southern edge of town, a Russian infantry platoon found itself pinned down in an impossible situation. They couldn't see the enemy. There was only the whine of drones overhead and the thud of automated machine guns echoing from the surrounding buildings, keeping their heads down. Sergeant Oleg, a veteran soldier, ordered his squad to fall back through an alley. "Move through that alley, we can find cover." They never made it to the other side. As they ran into the middle of the alley, a metal sewer grate was suddenly blown upwards. From beneath the street, another Z-500 robot emerged. Its thermal sensors flared to life, detecting 4 panicked human figures running toward it. At a precise range of 80 meters, it opened fire. The narrow alley became a corridor of death with no escape. This was no longer a defense, it was a hunt. A systematic hunt, where the predator knew the exact location of every piece of prey and used the most efficient tools to bring it down. The Russian forces weren't fighting an army. They were fighting an ecosystem of weapons, a network that acted as a single, unified entity, where the all-seeing eye in the sky guided the scythe on the ground. If you were a soldier in that trapped unit, what would you do? Drop your weapon and run, hoping for luck? Or stand and fight to the last bullet against an invisible enemy? Comment with 1 if you would hold your position. Press 2 if you would call for air support at all costs. But would air support even arrive in time? And if it did, could it handle the other surprises Volnava was hiding? Part 5. The final gamble in the sky. When a beast is wounded and cornered, it roars. At 4:31 a.m., the roar of the Russian bear finally echoed, not from the ground, but from the sky. Realizing the ground situation was spiraling out of control, Russian command made a desperate but logical choice: send in the Air Force. They had to break the invisible cage that was tightening around their soldiers. From a forward air base in Taganrog 2, Su-25 Frogfoot attack jets roared into the sky. They were flying tanks heavily armored and armed to the teeth with rockets, autocannons, and bombs. Their mission was clear: fly low, fly fast, flatten all resistance in Volnava, and create an escape corridor for the ground forces. The pilots, both seasoned veterans, believed it would be a relatively easy mission. Initial intelligence reported Volnava's air defenses were destroyed. They only had to watch out for a few shoulder-fired anti-aircraft missiles, manpads, something they were trained to handle. They never anticipated that they weren't the hunters, they were the prey. As the two Su-25 seconds entered Volnava's airspace, the thunder of their jet engines echoed through the valley. To the trapped Russian soldiers on the ground, it was the sound of hope of salvation. They looked to the sky, expecting a rain of fire to descend on their unseen enemy. But Yaroslav and his team heard that roar too, and they had been waiting for it. On the eastern outskirts of town, lying dormant in a field of burnt grass, was what looked like an ordinary shipping container. It had been there for weeks old and rusty, completely innocuous. But as the first Su-25 came within a 10 kilometers range, the container's roof suddenly split in two. From inside, not cargo but a single-use Gravehawk missile launcher was raised on a hydraulic lift. The entire system remained cold, emitting no radar or heat signals that could be detected. It was activated by sound, the specific acoustic signature of an Su-25 jet engine. The massive heat signature from the first Su-25's engines appeared brilliantly on the missile's infrared sensor. Target lock was achieved in less than a millisecond. A thunderous crack. A surface-to-air missile shot into the sky, leaving a thick white smoke trail. The Su-25 pilot never had a chance. His plane's missile warning system shrieked, but it was too late. He only had time to see the streak of fire hurtling toward him. 1 second, he was flying at 800 kilometers per hour. The next, his aircraft disintegrated into a mid-air fireball. Burning metal debris rained down, a horrific sight for the hopeful soldiers below. The pilot of the second Su-25, flying about a kilometer away, saw the whole thing. He immediately executed a hard defensive maneuver, deploying flares and chaff to decoy any incoming missiles. But the next weapon wasn't a missile. From another location, a Sparta drone shot into the sky. It didn't try to chase the Su-25. Instead, it flew directly into the jet's projected flight path. As the Su-25 roared past, the drone detonated. It wasn't carrying a large warhead, but something far more insidious, a directional fragmentation warhead. The explosion created a cloud of tungsten fragments traveling at hypersonic speeds, turning a large volume of airspace into a trap. The Su-25, despite its high-speed maneuver, flew directly into that cloud of death. Its right engine was shredded. The cockpit was breached. The sky was lit up once again. The last hope of the Russian forces on the ground was extinguished. Their cheers died on their lips. The silence after the two aerial explosions was more terrifying than the roar of the engines. It was the silence of utter despair, and when hope dies, a psychological collapse begins. The Russian formations completely broke. They were no longer an army, just scattered groups of panicked men trying to survive. Smoke from burning vehicles was thick, obscuring vision. GPS was dead. Communication was a fantasy. They were blind, deaf, and isolated. In that chaos, a new threat emerged, smaller but no less deadly. From the storm drains, a network of Zme 500 mini-robots crawled out. They were only the size of a small dog, moving on 6 mechanical legs that allowed them to traverse any terrain. They were armed with submachine guns, thermal sensors, and facial recognition systems programmed to identify Russian uniforms and equipment. They waited until groups of soldiers passed, then opened fire from low, unexpected angles. A Russian officer tried to rally his remaining men behind an overturned troop carrier. He screamed orders, but his voice was lost in the gunfire. A bullet tore through his leg. Another ripped through the vehicle's engine block. As he slumped to the ground, bleeding out, he whispered into his dead radio, "We were never in control." This was no longer a counterattack. This was a total collapse, tactical, technological, and most importantly, moral. If you were the commander of this unit surrounded with no support, what order would you give? Surrender or fight to the last man? Press 1 if you would fight to the last bullet. Press 2 if you would try to break the encirclement at any cost. But was there even a way to break out? Or was every path out already preordained to be a path to death? Part 6. The crack in the perfect machine. In war, they speak of the fog of war, the uncertainty and chaos that obscures the truth. But in Volnava, Ukraine had tried to create a machine that could see through that fog. A perfectly interconnected network of sensors and weapons operating with cold precision, but even the most perfect machine can have cracks. And at 4:34 a.m., a crack appeared. The heart of this entire coordinated system was Sparta 1, the reconnaissance drone circling high above its laser eyes, designating targets for the M777 artillery and ground units. It was the brain, the conductor of the symphony of destruction. And then it abruptly went dead. On Lieutenant Yaroslav's screen, the feed from Sparta 1 filled with static, then went black. Red text flashed on the display, signal link lost. The reason was unknown. Maybe it was a hardware malfunction. Maybe a piece of debris from an exploding Su-25 had accidentally struck it. Or maybe a long-range Russian electronic warfare system had finally found a way to jam it. Whatever the reason, the consequences were immediate and devastating. For the next 7 minutes, Ukraine's war machine was blind. The M777 artillery batteries immediately ceased fire. Without new targeting data, they didn't dare fire blindly, fearing they might hit friendly units moving in the darkness. The hidden Gravehawk missile launchers returned to standby mode. Ukrainian infantry teams moving to tighten the noose abruptly halted, receiving no guidance on enemy positions. The perfect coordination vanished, replaced by a deadly hesitation. And in that gap, the prey found an opening. From the southeast, a Russian Orlan 30 reconnaissance drone, which had been suppressed by the dense air defense network, now found a blind spot. It slipped through a corridor not covered by the automated turrets and crept into Volnova's airspace. Its camera eyes swept over the wreckage and spotted something Sparta 1 had missed. A Ukrainian fire team moving between two alleys, preparing to set up a new machine gun position. The coordinates were instantly relayed to a Russian mortar battery stationed on the outskirts. Seconds later, a salvo of mortar rounds landed on that exact position, a deafening blast. The entire fire team disappeared. Only ash and silence remained. The disaster didn't stop there. Z-500 Robot Unit Number 3, which was guarding a critical intersection between Railroad Street and Central Square, also fell victim. A piece of shrapnel from a stray Excalibur shell, which had lost its guidance signal at the last second, damaged its RF receiver. The massive robot froze, standing motionless like a lifeless metal statue. It had become a useless hunk of iron, but it was blocking a critical choke point in the kill zone. Without it, a major gap in the southeastern perimeter opened up, and the Russians in their desperation noticed. The surviving soldiers began to regroup, realizing the fire from that direction had stopped. A Russian officer yelled, "Go across the square. That's our way out." They began to pour through the gap. This was the moment Yaroslav's war machine was on the verge of collapse. He stared at his screens helpless. Launching the backup drone Sparta 2 would take precious minutes. In that time, the entire plan could unravel. But in the very moment that technology failed, the human spirit rose. A young Ukrainian private, seeing the stationary Z-500 and the enemy flooding through, tried to run to it to perform a manual reboot. He was cut down by a burst of machine gun fire before he could reach it. Witnessing this, another soldier, who history would only know by the call sign Court Wolf, did the unthinkable. He didn't try to fix the robot. He climbed onto its back, manually racked the jammed M2 Browning machine gun, and began firing. He turned himself into the turret for the dead machine. He had no cover. He was completely exposed to enemy fire. Coordinates, he screamed, not into a radio but to his comrades hiding nearby. Another soldier threw him a spare box of ammunition. Enemy rounds sparked off the robot's chassis all around him. Blood began to flow from a wound in his shoulder, but he kept squeezing the trigger, firing short, accurate bursts, holding back the Russian assault. Blood stained the pavement, but the southeastern line had to be held. In the moment when everything falls apart, when technology abandons you, what do? Do you run to save your own life, or do you stand in the gap using your own body to hold the line? Press 1 if you would fight like Court. Press 2 if you would fall back and regroup. Was the sacrifice of one anonymous soldier enough to save an entire operation? Or was it just the last brave act before failure? Part 7. The Silence After the Storm. The history of war is often told in loud explosions and cold statistics. But sometimes, the moment that defines a battle is not the sound of gunfire, but the silence. At 4:47 a.m. in Volnova, the guns fell silent, not because one side had run out of ammunition, but because one side had run out of fight. The position held by the soldier with the call sign Court had become a symbol. His sacrifice bought just enough time. At 4:42 a.m., the backup drone Sparta 2 finally synced with the system. The sky had eyes again. New centimeter-accurate targeting data streamed to the M777 batteries. One final artillery barrage, like a thunderclap of judgment, rained down on the Russian formation trying to break through. This time there was no resistance. Some fled in disarray. Some never moved again. The last Russian drone was spotted limping north, trailing a plume of black smoke. A Sparta unit intercepted it in mid-air. There was no celebration afterward, only silence. A heavy silence more profound than any of the explosions that had preceded it. From the shelters from the ruined buildings, Ukrainian soldiers began to emerge. They didn't look like victors. They looked like ghosts covered in ash and mortar dust, walking wearily through a landscape that had just endured an apocalypse. They didn't cheer. They didn't talk. They just worked in silence. They helped the wounded. They pulled tarps over the bodies of their fallen comrades, including Court, who had collapsed next to the machine gun he had manned. By 4:51 a.m. Volnova was officially back under Ukrainian control. A single flag was raised. It wasn't large or formal. It was a tattered blue and yellow flag tied to a bent steel pipe on the roof of the destroyed post office. There were no speeches, no anthems, just the crackle from a handheld radio. We're still here. What does victory smell like? It smells of smoke, blood, and exhaustion. Medics worked in the basement of a church, whose walls still trembled. Drones flew at low altitudes, not searching for enemies, but for survivors. One drone spotted movement in the rubble of a school. Zooming in, it revealed a Russian soldier alive but bleeding and trapped. His coordinates were passed to a nearby patrol. 3 Ukrainian soldiers approached, weapons still raised cautious. They saw him, a young man, perhaps only 19, his face pale from blood loss and fear. He closed his eyes, waiting for the final bullet. But the bullet never came. The patrol leader signaled for his men to lower their weapons. He slowly approached, knelt, opened a canteen, and offered it to the Russian soldier. "Drink," he said in broken Russian. Then he gestured. "Surrender. Come with us." And the young soldier in stunned disbelief nodded. He complied. Because the battle was over, but something far greater had just begun. When the sun finally rose over Volnava at 6:01 a.m., it didn't shine on waving flags or victory parades. The morning light illuminated charred ruins, covered bodies, and uncovered bodies, and soldiers kneeling, not in celebration, but in utter fatigue. On paper, this was a clean tactical success. 4 aircraft destroyed, 13 drones, shot down over 70 enemy soldiers neutralized, and a major assault broken. But the real victory wasn't on paper. Volnava wasn't just defended, it was defined. Ukraine didn't win because they had more missiles and drones. They won because they outthought their enemy, outlasted the chaos, and most importantly, refused to become the monster they were fighting. Amidst the ambushes, the burning homes, and the blood-soaked maps, a simple bottle of water given to a wounded enemy spoke more than any explosion. Strategists will analyze this campaign for decades. The silence, the bait, the coordination. But they will never feel the moment a child steps out of a shelter and sees a smoke-free sky for the first time in 4 months. They will never hear the whisper of a soldier saying, "We're still here." Technology won the battle, but humanity defined the victory. Volnava is proof that courage is not just about facing death. Sometimes the greatest courage is choosing life for yourself, for your people, and even for your enemy. If this story meant something to you, if you believe the world needs more than just weapons to survive, please like, subscribe, and share this video, and comment below. When everything else has burned away, what will you fight for?